The new film adaptation of Wuthering Heights is in full flight, and it's fair to say that it is not without its controversies.
It's time for another game of mental gymnastics to make the Wuthering Heights film adaptation make sense.
So Emerald Fennell is set to adapt a new version of Wuthering Heights, and I'm not excited.
I have tried to give this production the benefit of the doubt. I really have.
The internet blew up this month as we had the first look on the set of the film from leaked images that found its way onto the internet. These images show Margot Robbie, who is playing the lead of Catherine in the film, and we see her wearing a wedding dress. Now, as many people have already pointed out, this wedding dress is far from historically accurate.
If you haven't been following Gothic romance literature gossip, there has never been a better time to start. This dress is way too modern for 1783, when Catherine marries Linton. Her dress would have been more in this shape, but I also want to know, why didn't they put a petticoat or two over that? Cage crinoline is showing straight through, like you can literally see the hoops.
And this is just not what a wedding dress from the 1780s would have looked like at all. This is what a wedding dress from 1780 in England would have looked like. Or rather, this is exactly what it looked like, because this is a wedding dress from 1780.
And this isn't the only controversy currently surrounding the film. The main controversy is in the casting of the two heroes of the novel, or anti-heroes, depending on how you look at them. Catherine, played by Margot Robbie, and Jacob Elordi, who is playing Heathcliff. Now, a lot of people are concerned that Margot Robbie is just simply too old to be playing this role. Margot Robbie is 34, and the character of Catherine in the novel, we follow her from being a child to when she's in her early 20s. The issues of Jacob Elordi's casting are perhaps far more concerning. Heathcliff's character, as we will see as we dive into the novel, is very clearly not white. And the racial prejudice and discrimination that Heathcliff experiences in the novel is very integral to his character. And maybe I'm alone in this, but whenever I see Jacob Elordi, my first thought isn't, wow, that man must have struggled with discrimination and stigma all throughout his life based on how he looks. But to really understand the concerns that people have surrounding Emerald Fennell's new adaptation of Wuthering Heights, we first really need to understand not only the novel, but the author itself. So today I want to do a bit of a deep dive into Emily Brontë, a bit of a summary of the novel, and a bit of an analysis as well. Now, if Wuthering Heights is your ride and die, this may not be for you. So feel free to skip over towards the end for more discussion of the upcoming film and my predictions for it, or stay with me as we do a deep dive into this enigmatic literary classic. A novel that is truly as strange and indescribable as the author Emily Brontë was herself. There is a reason why this is considered one of the greatest novels of all time, and it was truly such a joy to reread this to make this video. Now, trigger warnings may not have been a thing back in the 19th century, but they are a thing now. So I just want to give you a heads up that this discussion will include discussion of racial prejudice and discrimination, as well as abusive relationships. So if that isn't for you, all good. I will see you next time. And I'm not sure if I have to give a spoiler alert for a text that's 177 years old, but spoiler alert! Let's get into the classic that has haunted readers across the centuries. Starting with perhaps the most haunting character of all, Emily Brontë herself. Emily Jane Brontë was born in 1818, the fifth child of 6 in a parsonage at the edge of the Yorkshire moors, a landscape that would come to define not only her imagination, but her identity. Her mother died when she was just 3, and death, quiet, relentless, unglamorous, would follow her everywhere. Emily lost 2 of her sisters in childhood, and her brother Branwell would die only a few months before Emily herself. All of the siblings were exceptionally talented. Unfortunately, Branwell's talents were lost to alcohol and gambling addictions prior to his death. This incredibly haunting painting of the siblings remains. It was painted by their brother Branwell, once of the 4 of them. But prior to his death, he erased himself from the background, leaving as a ghostly presence that watches over the 3 sisters. By 30, Emily was gone as well. Just one novel, a few poems, and a silence that has echoed throughout the centuries. Emily is often described as shy, reclusive, unfeminine. She was a very mixed character in the time from reports, and it's pretty clear that she was intolerant to bullshit. She loathed small talk, dinner parties, the lies of Victorian womanhood. She very much rejected the role of the Victorian lady. Emily's unsociable habits and unwillingness to please must be seen in this gendered context, which make her no freak, rather a woman courageous enough to resist absurd norms. When she was 20, Charlotte brought her to a boarding school in Brussels, but she lasted only 9 months. Emily grew so physically ill from the social strain that she stopped eating entirely and very nearly died. She was diagnosed with homesickness, which at the time was considered a genuine illness, and there she returned home. From childhood, Emily Brontë immersed herself in this imaginary world that she created with her sister Anne, called Gondal. In this fictional kingdom, there was wars, romances, rebellions, betrayals, and women characters who were bold and cruel and beautiful and free. Critics have said that Wuthering Heights is Gondal through and through, a continuation of her imaginary world that she continued in childhood. Transformed, filled with cruelty, ghost stories, savage landscapes, and impossible passion. It's said of Emily Brontë that her inner life was more real to her than any external experience. Emily never spoke to outsiders about her fictional world of Gondal, not once, but she wrote about it obsessively for decades, long after the age which she should have grown out of it. It wasn't a phase, it was a second world for her to escape into. When people think about the Brontë sisters, they tend to remember Charlotte as the writer who wanted fame, Anne as the moralist, and Emily as the enigmatic creature. She didn't write to the world, she wrote through it. Virginia Woolf wrote in 1925, after reading Wuthering Heights, "She looked out upon a world cleft into gigantic disorder, and felt within her the power to unite it in a book." What a review. So what actually happens in Wuthering Heights? To summarise the story as quickly and succinctly as I can, a man named Lockwood rents a house on the Yorkshire moors and discovers the tragic history of the neighbouring estate, Wuthering Heights. So years earlier, a wild young girl called Catherine Earnshaw grew up with an orphaned boy called Heathcliff. They loved each other fiercely, but Catherine chose to marry the wealthy Edgar Linton. And heartbroken, Heathcliff disappears, but when he returns, he comes back rich and vengeful and sets out to destroy both of the families across 2 generations. But eventually, the children of that destruction, Cathy and Hareton, fall in love and begin to heal what was broken. Heathcliff dies, and his ghost is said to wander the moors with Catherine. Wuthering Heights was first published in 1847 under the male pseudonym of Alice Bell, a deliberately ambiguous pseudonym chosen by Emily Brontë to protect herself from the misogyny of the literary world. When it was first released, reviewers were impressed. They praised it for its originality and its power and its ambiguity. But when it was revealed that Alice Bell was in fact Emily Brontë, a woman from Yorkshire, the tone shifted sharply. The very elements that they once admired, the violence, the sensuality, the moral ambiguity, were now seen as unnatural. So instead of calling her brilliant, they now called her mad. After her death, the world didn't know what to do with Emily Brontë. She never married, she didn't flirt, she didn't leave us any charming letters to give her insight into her life and internal world. And so the world made a myth of her. Some Victorians even wondered if Emily had been possessed. Others wondered, truly, if her brother Branwell had actually been the one to write the novel. Because how could a woman who has never loved, never travelled, never lived, write something so savage, so sublime? She has, I think quite beautifully, been described as the mystic of the moors. Emily Dickinson herself even called her the gigantic Emily Brontë. The myth is almost bigger than the woman, but I think that's the point. Emily Brontë didn't fit in her own era, and she doesn't even really fit in ours. She wasn't here to be understood, but just like the characters that she created, she is here to haunt us. Now let's make this clear. Wuthering Heights is not a love story.
It's a truly epic romance.
It's a revenge tragedy, a multi-generational trauma spiral soaked in rainwater and bad blood. It all begins when a man named Lockwood rents out a house on the Yorkshire moors. He goes to visit his landlord, which might be the most unrelatable part of this entire story, who lives over at a neighbouring estate called Wuthering Heights. But his welcome there is anything but warm. He's attacked by dogs and berated by the housekeeper. He meets his landlord, Heathcliff, who is anything but hospitable to him. And he also meets two young people who seem equally miserable, and Lockwood is very confused about how all of these relationship dynamics fit together. But the rudeness of these people quickly outweighs the curiosity that he feels. He wants to get the F out of Wuthering Heights. However, the weather takes a dramatic turn, and so Lockwood finds himself trapped at the estate. Now, weather plays a really important part in this novel, and it's almost a character in itself. Tumultuous weather often reflects what's going on in the character's life, what we know as pathetic fallacy in literary analysis. And so Lockwood is forced to spend his night in an abandoned bedchamber in the house. And this is where we get one of the most iconic scenes in literature. The room is cold and filled with remnants of the past, including a name that has been inscribed around the bed and on the windowsill. Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Linton, Catherine Heathcliff. Lockwood falls asleep tracing the letters and falls into a very uneasy sleep. He hears branches outside of the window rapping against the glass, and as he reaches out to move the branch, his hand is grabbed by a small and cold hand. The hand of a child, screaming, "Let me in, I'm come home." Immortalized, of course, in Kate Bush's song. After this fretful night, Lockwood wants to know what happened at Wuthering Heights. Who was that child? Who is Catherine? And so he asks the old housekeeper of the estate, which, very conveniently for him, is also a giant gossip called Nellie Dean. Now, this is where the narration in the book gets really funky, because the majority of the novel now consists in the housekeeper Nellie Dean's tale. She tells the story of all that has occurred at Wuthering Heights, starting way back when little Catherine was a child. The novel here becomes split between two different times. The story that Lockwood is being told by Nellie Dean and Nellie Dean's story itself. So now we've kind of got two narrators, Lockwood and Nellie Dean, which of course introduces the trope of the unreliable narrator. Nellie Dean's recollection of the past is now coloured with things that she knows in hindsight. She'll often interrupt her recollection to let Lockwood know that things aren't quite as they seem. And Lockwood's own narration of this narration is coloured by observations that he's making in the present moment. So the reader is forced to question, who can we really trust? Nellie Dean's tale begins when she was a child. She was the daughter of a housekeeper who worked at Wuthering Heights. And she grows up basically as a foster sister to Catherine and Hindley Earnshaw. Now these children, by all accounts, are quite spoilt and misbehave a lot. The tale really begins when one day Mr. Earnshaw goes away to Liverpool, and when he returns, he brings with him a small, penniless boy who's described as being bundled up in his coat as though he was a parcel. The father presents the child to the family, saying, "You must take it as a gift of God, though it's as dark almost as if it came from the devil." I think it's particularly important to know the use of the pronoun it when first describing Heathcliff, because as of yet, the family haven't decided whether or not this small child will be part of the family, because of his very clear racial ambiguity. We crowded round. I had a peep at the dirty, ragged, black-haired child. It repeated over and over some gibberish that nobody could understand. I was frightened, and Mrs. Earnshaw was ready to fling it out of doors. She did fly fly up, asking how he could fashion to bring this gypsy brat into the house. All I could make out amongst her scolding was a tale of seeing it, starving and houseless, and as good as dumb in the streets of Liverpool, where he picked it up and inquired of its owner. Not a soul knew to whom it belonged. It is made explicitly clear from Heathcliff's first introduction that his appearance marks him as other. He speaks a language that the family cannot understand, and his black curly hair and dark skin mark him as being physically different from the family as well. And the children treat him as such. They initially refuse to treat him as part of the family, as the father implores them to do. They tease, spit, and hit Heathcliff, and even Nellie, the housekeeper, admits that she refused to let Heathcliff into her bed as instructed, instead letting him sleep on the stairs like a dog. To say the truth, I did the same, and we plagued and went on with him shamefully. So it is fair to say that Heathcliff's introduction is anything but nice in this novel. It is also explicitly clear that Heathcliff is not white. Heathcliff remains racially ambiguous throughout the novel. Various characters wonder whether he is of Chinese, Indian, or Romanian origin. And throughout the novel, Heathcliff remains the victim of racial discrimination instantly based on his appearance. So from the very beginning, Heathcliff is not just poor, he's cast as foreign, racially ambiguous, and linguistically other. His presence unsettles the family dynamic, and his position in the house is never truly secure. He's not a child among children, he's a symbol of disorder, of class collapse, of racial and moral unease. This early alienation doesn't just shape his character, it becomes his character. He spends the rest of the novel trying to reclaim power in a world that told him from the first that he didn't belong. Catherine and Heathcliff, however, quickly become inseparable. Not sweetly, but fiercely, like two storms in love with their own destruction. The adults try to discipline them, but Catherine and Heathcliff form their own world that no one else can enter. They escape every day to the mall for hours, skipping sermons, avoiding society, returning home with muddy feet and secret smiles. No matter how often they're punished, they forget it the minute that they were together again. For them, freedom is worth the cost, and every restriction just adds fuel to their shared defiance. The relationship between Catherine and Heathcliff drives Hindley, the eldest brother, wild, and his treatment of Heathcliff becomes harsher and harsher as a result. What no one around them can understand, not Hindley, not Nellie Dean, is that Heathcliff and Cathy don't seem to care about the same things that everyone else does, like class, comfort, church. One day, Heathcliff and Cathy escape, and they go and spy on the neighbouring children. And there they watch these two children crying and fighting, even in their beautiful house. Heathcliff says, "We laughed outright at the petted things. We did despise them. I'd not exchange for 1,000 lives my condition here for Edgar Linton's at Thrushcross Grange." But this is where everything changes. The children are caught in the act of spying on this household, and they send the dogs and servants after them to capture them. Heathcliff is instantly racially profiled and treated as a robber, and Catherine's association with him originally damns her. That's until they recognise her as the young girl from the Earnshaw family who they've seen in church. They take her back into the home and give her food and shelter, but they won't let Heathcliff inside, and they send him back to Wuthering Heights. Catherine ends up staying with the Linton family for 6 weeks, and there she is taught refinement, made to change her wild ways, and when she returns to Wuthering Heights, she returns as a changed Catherine. She's pampered and beautiful, wearing this, white riding clothes. And by this time in Wuthering Heights, Mr. Earnshaw has passed away, and Hindley, the brother, is now in control of the estate. And so, with Heathcliff now under his control, he allows Heathcliff to fall to degradation. He refuses him education. He doesn't allow him to wash. And so the reunion of Catherine and Heathcliff is far from joyous. Catherine rushes over to Heathcliff, overjoyed, but recoils at his appearance. "How very black and cross you look. But that's because I'm used to Edgar and Isabella Linton." Heathcliff is humiliated as Catherine asks why he hasn't washed his face or combed his hair. They can't return again to this world that's only their own because now Catherine is part of this other world too, this world of class and comfort. From this point on, their relationship is charged with something else, something darker, with shame, pride, and very soon, betrayal. This is when a choice is made, a choice that they can never recover from. Catherine chooses to marry Edgar Linton from the neighbouring house. Critics often see that the book's use of light and dark imagery as a moral shorthand. Edgar Linton is pale and clean, and Heathcliff is dark and wild. But Wuthering Heights flips that logic. Catherine calls Edgar, like the foliage in the woods, it will change. Whereas Heathcliff is the eternal rock beneath, a source of little visible delight, but necessary. Here, light is superficial, darkness is depth, permanence, and passion. Catherine Earnshaw never falls out of love with Heathcliff. She confesses all of this to Nellie Dean, and in doing so, she also confesses something that scares Nellie Dean, something that will haunt the entire novel. Catherine says that she doesn't just love Heathcliff, she is Heathcliff. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same, and Linton's is as different as the moonbeam from lightning or frost from fire. And Nellie, I am Heathcliff. The nature of this confession, I am Heathcliff, has understandably puzzled readers and critics for centuries. One of the most famous analyses of Wuthering Heights comes from The Mad Woman in the Attic. Gilbert and Goober argue that Catherine and Heathcliff represent two aspects of a single consciousness, and that their intense, transgressive bond expresses a profound psychic split, a doubling that often occurs in women's literature to represent internalized conflict. It means that when Catherine chooses Edgar over Heathcliff, she's also betraying herself. Literary critic Terry Eagleton also does a fantastic analysis of this moment. He calls it a crucial act of self-betrayal and bad faith, a moment when Catherine sacrifices her authentic self for class and respectability. She tries to lead two lives, Edgar's wife by day and Heathcliff's soulmate by night. But you can't run a metaphysical affair with one man while playing house with another. Ooh, that is my literary turn on right there. When Catherine chooses Edgar, she unmakes herself, their world together, their soul. Though she admits to Nellie Dean that she loves Heathcliff, she says that to marry him now would degrade her, because Heathcliff has been brought so low in his manners and his education by his treatment from her own brother. She chooses to betray him and herself in order to marry someone that society will approve of. And this right here is the hinge on which the entire novel turns. Catherine attempts to juggle two realities: the metaphysical truth of her identity with Heathcliff and the material comfort life with Edgar. And it's impossible. Catherine seeks both social respectability and unrestrained love. In this world, you can't be both true and accepted. The moment Catherine makes her choice, she splits the soul of the novel in two, and both she and Heathcliff begin to unravel. And so Catherine Earnshaw becomes Catherine Linton, and Heathcliff, heartbroken, disappears. 3 years go by, and in this time, Catherine Linton lives very happily with her husband, Edgar Linton, and his sister, Isabella Linton, until one day, Heathcliff unexpectedly returns, spotted at first by Nellie Dean, and Heathcliff has entirely changed. He is handsome, rich, and no one knows where he got the money from. And he arrives at Thrushcross Grange intending to confront Catherine about the decision and what it did to him. But he can't, because when he sees Catherine and how overjoyed she is at his return, he realizes that Catherine never stopped loving him. And so instead, we get a confrontation between Catherine and Heathcliff about why she made the decision that she did. Why did she choose to betray everything that they had to marry Edgar Linton? You loved me. Then what right had you to leave me? I have not broken your heart, you have broken it. And in breaking it, you have broken mine. He accuses her of not just hurting him, but of undoing the very meaning of their existence. This isn't just doomed love, it's something stranger and far more terrifying. Lyndall Gordon describes their connection as not romantic nor erotic, it's strange, and yet there's a familiar element. Their love doesn't bring joy, it brings necessity, like oxygen or gravity or death. Eagleton goes further, calling it a non-social, pre-social bond, something that exists outside of marriage and morality and even time. So when Catherine chooses Edgar, she doesn't just marry the wrong man, she unmakes herself. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. But what happens when you sever a soul in two? You get a ghost, and you get Heathcliff. Catherine dies young, she dies wild, and she dies refusing to let go of Heathcliff, even in death. But this is no tender passing. On her deathbed, Catherine pulls Heathcliff close, not to say goodbye, but to curse him with her grief. She asks if 20 years from now, he'll stroll past her grave and say, "I loved her once." And Heathcliff, choking with fury, throws back, "You have killed yourself." Heathcliff doesn't heal. He doesn't bury her and move on. He throws himself against trees and bloodies his head and curses the heavens. "Be with me always. Take any form, drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss. I cannot live without my soul." This is the moment in the novel where Heathcliff stops being a man and starts being a gothic archetype, a Byronic shadow living only to destroy and to haunt. After Catherine dies, Heathcliff doesn't move on. He moves in, not into grief, but into vengeance. And he doesn't just want to punish those who've wronged him. He wants to corrupt the next generation. It's revealed that Catherine has actually died in childbirth, and she leaves a daughter, which they also called Kathy, which is just very confusing for readers, so we're gonna call her Kathy too. It becomes Heathcliff's sworn purpose now on Earth to destroy both bloodlines, the Lintons and the Earnshaws. He begins with Hindley Earnshaw, Catherine's older brother. Heathcliff returns to Wuthering Heights and deliberately encourages Hindley's alcoholism, gambling with him until the house and Hindley's dignity are both lost. By the end, Hindley is bankrupt, dying and bitter, but Heathcliff doesn't stop there. Hindley has also had a son called Hareton, and Heathcliff is determined to raise that boy in a manner that is as degraded and humiliating as the way that Heathcliff himself was raised. He marries Isabel Linton, Edgar's sister, not out of love, but as a form of warfare. Heathcliff essentially traps and tricks her into an unhappy marriage, and she bears him a son called Linton Heathcliff. And my god, are the names confusing in this novel. Isabella does manage to escape for a time with her son, but eventually she passes away, and Linton ends up in the care of Heathcliff. Heathcliff's master plan is for Kathy too and Linton to marry, which would give him control of both Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering Heights. By the end, Heathcliff has gotten everything that he wants. Aside from him, all of the first generation of children pass away, and he gets control of all of the fortune and the 3 children that they left behind. Cathy too and Linton Heathcliff do marry for a time, but Linton is very sickly and so he passes away. This isn't just a personal grudge, it's a generational curse, and he becomes the architect of every broken life within these walls. Emily's Heathcliff stands unredeemed by any conventional moral standards. But here's the twist. As the young Cathy and Hareton begin to find a strange, awkward tenderness between them, Heathcliff, the master of manipulation, starts to fade. His revenge loses its meaning, and he begins to see ghosts again. By the end, Heathcliff is exhausted, not defeated, just done. His obsession has consumed everything and everyone around him, and it's now consuming him. He stops eating, he starts walking to the malls at night, and he begins talking to ghosts. Last night I was on the threshold of hell. Today I am within sight of my heaven. Heathcliff sees Catherine everywhere, in the wind, in the mirror, in the faces of the children that he has twisted to his will, and he tells Nellie Dean, "I tell you, I have nearly attained my heaven, and that of others is altogether unvalued and uncoveted by me." Heathcliff becomes this figure trapped within the twilight realm between life and death, obsession with a desire so absolute it turns him into a living corpse. And then, one rainy morning, they find him lying still, eyes open, lips curled, grinning at death. His eyes met mine so keen and fierce I started. His face and throat were washed with rain, his parted lips and sharp white teeth sneered too. Even in death, Heathcliff refuses to shut his eyes. Lyndall Gordon has written that Heathcliff and Catherine's love was never meant to be lived. It could only be sustained through death. The union that haunts and torments the lovers is recovered in their afterlife. In his final moments, Heathcliff makes the shocking revelation to Nellie Dean that he has disturbed the coffin of Catherine. He has disturbed the dead. He ordered someone to remove the lid so he could briefly look upon her again. And he removes the side of her coffin, placing what will become his right next to hers, so that in death their dust can mingle. Two of the most commonly cited taboos across human history are disturbing the dead and incest. And this moment has a bit of a flavour of the two, becoming one of the most haunting and uncomfortable moments, not only within Wuthering Heights, but maybe within all of literature. In the final chapter, Lockwood, who has now heard the entire tale, visits the grave of Catherine, Edgar, and Heathcliff, and he wonders. I lingered round them, wondering how anyone could ever imagine unquiet slumbers from the sleepers in that quiet earth. But we do imagine it. We must, because Wuthering Heights is not a tale that will ever let us rest. It does not end in forgiveness, but in this kind of release. Cathy too and Hareton, the next generation, plant a garden, share books, fall in love, show signs of redemption. But Heathcliff and Catherine, they're still seen by the locals wandering the moors, not alive, not dead, but together at last. Wuthering Heights has been called one of the greatest novels of all time, and rightly so. There was no novel like it at the time, and I don't really think there's been one since. Everything from the story to the way that it's structured is very unconventional. When people think about Wuthering Heights, they tend to remember the tragic love story between Cathy and Heathcliff. But what's very strange, especially if you're a first-time reader of this book, is finding out that this love story doesn't even take up half of the novel. There is so much more going on, especially with Heathcliff's character, which really the entire novel revolves around. The love story between these characters is also incredibly strange, because it's not the kind of love romance that we saw in sentimental novels that came prior and what we may think of now. We don't see this kind of yearning, erotic desire between these two characters. We don't see scenes of kissing and confessions of love. The relationship that is explored is quite platonic, if not almost incestuous in places. The love that they have between them is as strange as the novel itself. There's a reason that many people consider Wuthering Heights to be a ghost story. It starts with a ghost and arguably it ends with one too. But Emily Brontë never makes it clear whether or not these ghosts are real. She does ask, what happens when something is too powerful to die? When Lockwood sees this pale hand at the window and the child's voice whispering, "Let me in!" we don't know if he's dreaming or if he's the first one to meet Catherine's restless spirit. And the novel never confirms this either way. Lucasta Miller writes that the brilliance of this moment lies in its unresolvedness. We are left in a radically unsettled state, not knowing whether the ghost is real or a dream. And the novel will never tell us either. Even in the ending, the rumours of Heathcliff and Catherine seen walking together on the moors is poised between folklore and faith. One of the most famous analyses of Wuthering Heights is in The Mad Woman in the Attic, and it's argued here that Catherine's haunting is more than supernatural. It's a form of feminine protest. She is literally stuck out of the house, scratching to get back in, a woman denied identity, denied rest, and denied her own story. Catherine is not just a ghost, she is the female author's double, trapped in a narrative she didn't choose and screaming to be let back into it. This isn't your typical Victorian ghost story. This is not a ghost with a message. This is a ghost with unfinished business. A love story that became a curse. A woman who dies not peacefully, but feeling only death. And it's not just Cathy. The novel's end, Heathcliff too is seen wandering the moors with her, by children, farmers, shepherds, all swearing they've seen a glimpse of the two of them together. As Miller puts it, ultimately the novel will not allow us to pin down what has happened to the lovers. It is this lack of closure that makes Wuthering Heights such a haunting book. Despite all of this, Emily's novel refuses to be just a ghost story, or even a love story, or even a gothic thriller. It deliberately resists genre altogether. The novel baits us with gothic excess, but resists certainties to every level. Even the supernatural is never quite pinned down. This is why so many film adaptations get it wrong. They try to literalize the haunting, but what Emily Brontë gives us is something stranger, a metaphysical mood. A hauntedness that lingers in the landscape, not just the plot. At the end of the novel, Cathy too and Hareton prepare to leave Wuthering Heights. But Heathcliff and Cathy stay behind, not in the grave, not in the wind, but in the reader's imagination. Emily doesn't want to give you answers. She wants you to sit with the ghosts of love, a love too wild, too cruel, too boundless to be explained. Now, Wuthering Heights was published in 1847, and just 14 years earlier, Britain had formally abolished slavery. But the empire was still booming, and so were the racial hierarchies that kept it running. Conversations around race, morality, and English identity were everywhere, especially in cities like Liverpool, where imperial trade brought wealth, poverty, and a rapidly shifting population. Heathcliff's entire arc is about reclaiming power in a world that had radicalized and rejected him. He's refused education, denied inheritance, humiliated, degraded. But then he returns, richer than everyone, to dismantle the social structure that had excluded him in the first place. As Terry Eagleton argues, Heathcliff becomes this kind of parody of capitalism, wielding the tools of power that he once lacked, but with any real joy or redemption. It's important to note that the novel never confirms Heathcliff's ethnicity, and this racial ambiguity is no accident. There are mentions at various times of where he may have been born, based on his appearance. Heathcliff is found by Mr. Earnshaw in Liverpool, and this was then Britain's busiest slave trade port. The British Empire was expanding, and so were the anxieties surrounding race, inheritance, and class. These were conversations that were part of Emily Bronte's world, discussed and debated in publications and newspapers that she read with her siblings every week. Emily didn't invent Heathcliff's character in a vacuum. She grew up during debates about empire, trade, and inheritance, and she lived in Yorkshire, not very far from Liverpool, a city brimming with immigrants, enslaved people, and colonial wealth. Now, with all of this in mind, we have more context about why Jacob Elordi's casting has been so controversial. His ambiguous origins and outsider appearance set him apart, subjecting him to abuse and marginalisation all throughout his life. Critics argue that Jacob Elordi, known for his roles in Euphoria and Saltburn, of course, overlooks the critical aspect of Heathcliff's identity. As Michael Stewart, the director of Brontë Writing Centre, has noted, within Wuthering Heights, you've had many years of white actors playing more ambiguous ethnic characters. But things are different now. The way we represent certain people in art and culture comes with a responsibility now that wasn't there 20 years ago. This, of course, isn't the first time that a white actor has played the role of Heathcliff. Back in 1939, we had Laurence Olivier and Tom Hardy in the 2009 adaptation. All of these have sidestepped the character's racial ambiguity. However, in the 2011 version, we broke this pattern by casting James Howson, a black British actor, as Heathcliff, a choice praised for aligning more closely with Bronte's descriptions. Fennell's decision to revert to a white actor portrayed has been seen by some as a step backward, especially in an era when representation and authenticity are increasingly valued. And I would agree. Fennell is known for her provocative storytelling in Promising Young Women and Saltburn, and may have a specific vision for this adaptation. Perhaps she aims to explore Heathcliff's otherness through a different lens, focusing on psychological or class-based alienation rather than racial identity. Yet this approach raises the question, can the essence of Heathcliff's character be fully captured without acknowledging the racial dynamics that underpin his experience? Does reimagining his identity risk diluting the novel's commentary on social prejudice? When the images of Margot Robbie as Catherine in the wedding dress came onto the internet, I, like many other history lovers, was triggered. This dress is absolutely not a wedding dress that would have been worn by someone in the late 18th to early 19th century when this book is set. In fact, it's so modern that it's almost jarring. And I think the initial inclination is to point out why it's inaccurate and why Fennell doesn't know what she's doing. But I think that she does. These images didn't just get leaked by accident. And they have very effectively driven a lot of rage bait, which gives advertisement for the movie. Here I am sitting here making a YouTube video about it. It has gotten people talking and invested in the production of this film. And if her other films don't already speak for themselves, Fennell is a very highly educated woman. And she's also very familiar with Wuthering Heights. Some of the most shocking moments in the film Saltburn are directly inspired and references to Wuthering Heights. Also, I believe, and have made previous videos about. And so when Fennell announced that she was adapting Wuthering Heights, I really wasn't surprised. And it almost felt like these moments in Saltburn were a bit of an Easter egg to her next project. It was clearly still ticking away in her head. So why is Margot Robbie wearing a wedding dress that is so not in tune to the era? I don't think Fennell's film is going to be a simple adaptation of Wuthering Heights. I think it's going to pay into this kind of timelessness and fantasy element of the novel. Very much like the novel itself plays with the concept of time, the two different narrators, this ghost that continues to haunt the earth and live on afterwards. I think we could well see it play with different times and eras throughout this film. And we know from the success of things like Bridgerton that sometimes we can be inspired by a historical period and still very successfully reimagine this period and its clothing. But this is the thing that I'm not quite convinced about and where my concern comes from. Wuthering Heights, the enigmatic love story that continues to haunt us and does feel timeless, is still a product of its time. Emily Bronte's world and the character of Heathcliff particularly weren't created in a vacuum. They were very inspired by the social and cultural debates going on around her. And Fennell has successfully played with this intersection of race and class before. The character of Farley in Saltburn has been praised by critics for doing just that, and opening up conversations of how class and race intersect when it comes to prejudice. While Catherine's wedding dress can inspire me with some hope and excitement for the film, I just can't find any way in which Jacob Elordi's casting can be justifiable. And it's not like this story that is 177 years old has been told often with someone who isn't white playing Heathcliff. It took until 2011 for a black British actor to finally play the role. And while you can leak pictures of an inaccurate wedding dress for rage bait, you can't morally do that with racial casting, which I'm a little bit concerned that this might be, because again, it has gotten people to start talking about the film, but not for the right reasons. And while Emily Bronte's book is still very much a product of its time and no way a gold standard for allyship, it is an attempt to write a story about racial discrimination, which sympathises very heavily with Heathcliff, and it tries to explain how Heathcliff became, eventually, by choice, the monster that the world had cast him to be. It's a sad tale, it's a tragic tale, and it's a tale incredibly close to so many people's hearts. I think Fennell's adaptation is going to be filled with surprises, and it's not going to be a truthful adaptation in the way that we expect it to be. But I think it's only right that we remain concerned that the heart of the novel remains untouched. What are your predictions for this film? What do you think Fennell actually has in store? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll put up my videos on Saltburn to the side if you're interested in watching those. And I hope this has inspired you to go on a bit of a literary date with Emily Brontë. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and I'll see you next time at Kinky History. Okay, so apparently I'm not done. I had some thoughts while I was editing the video, and my mind kept on coming back to the significance of the window scene, particularly the fact that we see this, ghostly, iconic, scary scene of this little child's hand, and why is it a child? Whether or not this ghost is real, Catherine passes away in her early 20s. And I think it's this. It isn't the moment where Catherine chooses to marry Edgar Linton where everything changes. It's the night that she first spends time at Thrushcross Grange, and if she had come home that night instead of spending what would end up being 6 weeks drenched in water to come home to Heathcliff, nothing would have changed. They would have remained children complete if they were able to live in that moment. That's really the time when they both lose their innocence, and I think for Emily Brontë, the loss of innocence, childish innocence, is everything. That's why she'll still escape to her imaginary world of Gondal years after she's told that it's a childish fantasy. Her imagination that is fueled by landscapes and people that she sees in her childhood is everything. And I think it's everything in Wuthering Heights as well. We imagine Catherine's ghost tapping on the window to let her in, because maybe if she had been let in that night, if she had come home, the soul of Catherine and Heathcliff would never be split. Anyway, I'm gonna go bust out some Kate Bush now, but not play it here for copyright license song purposes.